this VIZ Designer tutorial. In this how-to video, I will show you some more tips and tricks to lift the wow factor of your app layout to a higher level. In my first tip, I want to demonstrate how to use the CSS option for linear sliders to create an individual layout for your slider elements. My second tip is about using sliders instead of analog meter elements to display measured values. And finally, you will learn how to use a web page element to integrate, for example, the weather forecast widget to your app layout. Okay, let's get started. First, let me show you my example remote, which I have prepared for you. What you see in the VIZ Designer desktop application is an iPad remote here, based on a room navigation. It consists of an index page, several room pages, and the index page we have different circle room buttons, the dining room, the living room, the kitchen, to navigate to the room pages. To create this layout, I used the star skin and the color style green thin. Just let me show you in the preview. See the index page, navigation to the room pages. This is empty because it's an example. Just the living room and the kitchen are full of content. Additionally, we have a pop-up. This is the pop-up, which will be opened by a button on the index page, by this button, to display a current weather forecast. The pop-up is now still empty because I want to fill it in tip number 3. So more on this later. Now let's start with the tips. In my first tip, I want to explain how to create your own style for linear slider elements by using CSS commands. Okay, for all those who are now thinking, ooh, I'm out, what is CSS? Do I have to be a software developer? Just no. So please stay tuned because you don't have to be a CSS professional to get this done. You only have to use very few styling commands, which is no rocket science. But first, what is the benefit of a CSS slider? Since you can use the wide range of our stylish image-based sliders. Well, with CSS sliders, you are completely free to create your own styles and have great flexibility to generate nice effects for your remote. Okay, let's get going. To start, just drag a slider element to the page, vertical. Okay. And click on style and the properties of the slider and go to the CSS tab. Here you can define the slider with CSS commands. Let's start with some general information how to use this tab. Our CSS slider is always composed of the following parts, which you can select via a drop-down menu, this drop-down menu. We have the layout, container, knob, background left, right, corner right. What are these parts? Here is the preview of the slider. What are these parts? The layout, you can see it here, defines the general size settings for the different parts. The container defines the background of the entire slider. The knob is the touch point of the slider. Here, this is the knob. Then we have background left. This is this part of the slider, which is the dynamic part, and the background right. This part of the slider which is static, and the both corners, corner left here and corner right here. Well, these are the parts of any CSS slider in the VIZ Designer. Now you can use the drop-down and select the slider part you want to modify. For example, corner right. Therefore, enter the CSS commands in the input field on the right. These are the CSS commands. Here, this is the input field. So this is a CSS command, background color, border bottom right, and so on. And this is the command. Well, but you don't have to be a CSS programmer. The entered CSS commands in this field only apply to the selected part. Here, just corner right. So container, here for the container part, there is still no CSS command. You can see the modifications made directly in the preview window. For all who are familiar with CSS, it's completely simple. Just enter the commands in the input field and that's it. For all others, I now want to give you some practical tips to use this option without an existing CSS know-how. All in all, there are actually not many CSS parameters that are important and mostly needed. Among these are the background to define the color and gradient of the background, the border radius to create, for example, rounded corners, and box shadow, for example, for a shadow effect. There are some others, but these are the important ones. Well, the best way to get this done is to just try it out and check the effects. And what about CSS newbies? How do they get the CSS commands without having CSS knowledge? All CSS beginners can use one of the many free web CSS generators. There you can easily generate the code with an easy-to-use editor, for example, a gradient editor, and then simply copy and paste the code into the CSS field of the slider. That's it. Whoa, let's do it for this slider. Okay, so for my example of this slider, I don't want to have a knob. So I just enter 0 and 0. I don't want to have corners either. So I want to have a background which is full. So I have to enter the same. Okay. Now I want no knob, so I just can delete the code. I want to have no background right. Delete the code. I want to have no corner left and right. So just delete the codes. I just want to have the background left to display the dynamic position and the background in the container. I want to have an outline for this. Do I get that? So just switch to a CSS generator in the web. You can research for it. So, for example, this one, web code tools. Here you have the option to define different parameters like border radius, box shadow, opacity, and whatever. I want to have just an outline for my slider. So I select, all sides, color white, solid, and not 10 pixel, but just thin 2 pixels. Okay. The generator generates the code. This is the code. Just copy and paste it. Just copy it and then paste it here in the enter field in the VIZ Designer. You see, the container now has an outline, a white outline, 2 pixels. Now I also want to have rounded corners. Again, switch to the generator, select border radius. You see the preview. I want to have about 20 radius of 20 pixels. Again, copy the generated code, paste it in the next row, and you have rounded corners. That's really no rocket science. Now let's define the background left. You can use this color editor, for example, here. It's green, but I don't want to have a background color, but I want to have a gradient. So just switch again, search in the web for example, for a gradient generator like Colorzilla here. And you can use predefined gradients like this, for example, just to show you. This is not what I want to do, but just to show you how it works. Just copy it in the field, and now you have this gradient here in the slider, CSS slider. I don't want another one. Again, because our design is in green, I use here this green one, and then just use the options of the generator, the opacity, copy it, set the opacity to 20%, 30, copy it again, 70, location, positioning, and opacity 20%. Now copy this one again, because I want to have a sharp cut. Yeah, again, this one here, sharp cut. Okay, like this. It's just an example to have something different. Copy the generated code, copy and enter it, and you can see, yes, it looks like in the generator. Now I also want to have rounded corners here for the background left. Again, switch to generator, border radius, and now I just want to have rounded corners for the upper right and the lower right corners. Just top left, no. Bottom left, no. And here we have pixels. Copy the code. Row, paste it, and you can see rounded corners for my background left. Now apply, and that's it. Just position it here. Looks very different to the other sliders. Now I don't want to have the white outlines, so I want to copy this green for the outlines as well. Again, open style, CSS slider, container part. Here is the white outline. This is this code. Now I go to the background left, just copy the color code here and paste it in the container area here in the part border. And now you have green outlines, just like this. Let's have a look. The preview. Okay. Looks very cool. As you've seen, the CSS slider is a useful option for everyone, not only for CSS pros. In my second tip, I want to demonstrate how easy it is to use sliders, especially linear sliders, as analog meters. Slider, page, vertical, for example. Here, okay. Now we have a slider. Simply assign the device with the desired measured values as a status in the properties. Okay, go to the properties, assign the status which you want to display, device, for example, Tado radiator or thermostat, and current temperature. Apply. Okay. But it's still a slider. But you have advanced options for the slider. Here. Here you can define the interval for thermometer. It's not 1 to 100, but maybe it's 5 degrees to 32 degrees or something like that. And the step interval 0.5. But the most important thing is to disable the sliding function, which is this checkbox, disable control. Just check the box, you can disable the control function. Otherwise, the slider would be still slidable in the UI, which would be quite irritating for an analog meter. So just tick this disable control box, and now only the status will be displayed. And the slider works as an analog meter. That's all. Let me show you now an example which combines both tips. I will use a CSS slider to create a thermometer. Therefore, I will copy this CSS slider to an empty page. Because it's easier to demonstrate. For my example, I have already imported a thermometer image. Just drag an image to the page and select the imported image, miscellaneous. This is the imported image. Apply. Okay, this is my image. Well, I already have edited this image with an image editor, for example, Photoshop, to get the desired color, the green color. Now I want to use this CSS, this slider, the CSS slider, to dynamically display the temperature within this thermometer image. Okay, looks strange now, but you will see. Just go to the properties and style. Now CSS tab. Okay, we don't want to have a knob. We don't want to have corners. And we don't want to have the background, right? Okay, let's try it out. Apply. Looks a bit better, but the color is not right, of course. To get the green color of this thermometer image, you can use a graphic editor, or you can use a workaround with a text field. And the color picker of the text field, just open the color picker and pick the color of the thermometer, copy the hex code of the color, and then just open the CSS slider again, go to background left, and enter the hex code instead of the gray. Now you have the same green as the thermometer image. Apply. Okay, looks better now. But now I want to have rounded corners as well. Again, CSS slider and the background left. Switch to a generator, border radius. Just use it. Border radius. You see the rounded corners. Well, now it looks like a thermometer, like it is just one image, but it isn't. It's an image and a slider, which is dynamic and shows the correct temperature. Okay, let's integrate it to the kitchen page. Just copy it, kitchen, delete that one, and this one, and paste it. Smaller. Here. Now you have a combined element of a slider and an image, which is very cool and shows the temperature with the CSS slider as an analog meter. My third tip is about web page elements. Let's switch to the weather forecast pop-up. Just drag web page element to the pop-up page. Now you can click on Set HTML frame in the properties. Although you need HTML code here, for this example, no HTML knowledge is necessary because you only have to copy and paste the code. Now, let's do it. To get the HTML code of the weather widgets, which you can copy, you can find HTML widgets on many meteorological sites on the internet. Just research it and choose the provider you like. I will use one of the Meteor Blue widgets in my example. Just switch widget. Here's the Meteor Blue page. Different widgets. I want to use this one. Okay, configurator with background image, no background, and bright text. Okay, I want to have degrees Celsius. Just copy the provided HTML code. Go to the VIZ designer, enter it in the main section, then delete the presets because you don't want to have a background, and save. And you can see, okay, here is the weather widget. Now resize it. Okay, so that the widget fits. Okay. Yeah, that's it. Now let's check the preview. Switch to the index page and open the preview. Okay, click on the weather button. Now the weather widget opens, which you can click. If you like, you can additionally set the time interval for auto refresh because it's not necessary to refresh every 5 seconds, maybe 30 seconds or something like that. Okay, that's it. You see, you can use the web page element without HTML knowledge. Just copy the widget and the widget code, and that's it. All right, that's it for now with this tutorial. As you've seen, the VIZ Designer is a very powerful tool with many features to make your app user interface as individual as you are. I hope you enjoyed it. Have fun using our amazing VIZ Designer. Bye bye.